In the year 1974, a town would fall under the shadow of a chilling phantom of terror as a sinister game of cat and mouse unfolded before their horrified eyes. With the mind steeped in madness, meticulously selecting his victims, reveling in their suffering as he bound them, tortured them, and killed them. The city shaken with fear, plagued by uncertainty at every door knock, torn between hope for salvation and the dread of falling into the clutches of the evil figure lurking in the shadows. Caught in a haunting game of catch me if you can, their breaths held captive by fear, they would soon learn the harrowing tales of the infamous serial killer known today as BTK. Welcome back to another episode of Tell Me Darling. I am Jess.
And I'm Phil.
And this is our podcast. I still need to work on that. I'm very sorry. But this is our true crime podcast where I tell Phil true crime stories and he sometimes reacts.
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes he just sits there gobsmacked because he just can't believe what I'm telling him. I'm assuming.
No, that's what it is.
Yeah. And then sometimes you throw curveballs at me where you ask me like random as shit questions.
What type of car was it?
I forget already. We are behind this week. We're actually recording, if anything, in real time because we'll be posting in 2 days, which we're normally a week and a half ahead. So we're in real time. We're going to have to work quick this week to get this episode out.
Will we?
Well, someone will. Someone will have to work quick. It is an exciting week, though.
Is it?
You tell me, is it?
Oh, yeah. Shit, son. I always forget. Yeah, it's your birthday week, isn't it?
It is my birthday week.
Damn.
It is. On Saturday, I'm turning 32, which I hate to say out loud. That feels like the next level up. I don't know.
Yeah.
30 is like fun. 31's like, it's another step, but it's still fun. But 32 just feels like it's really like cementing me growing.
No, honey, 32 is young. Just pretend, just flip it.
I know
23. You're 23.
20. I feel 23.
You should.
Sure.
You look 23.
Anyway, we're having a little party at home on Saturday night, a little karaoke party.
Can we use these mics for karaoke?
No.
Oh.
I've hired a karaoke machine.
Oh.
So it comes with 2 mics.
There better be some gangster music we can rap to.
I don't know. I hope so. I'm very excited. And then what else are we doing? We've got a show on Friday night that I got invited to, some kind of Cirque du Soleil thing.
Yep.
So I was like, sure, because it's my birthday weekend. And yeah, I don't know what else is planned. I want to go to the Barbie movie.
Oh, sold out probably.
That's what I would like to do. I'm desperate to see that movie. But anyway, today's episode is quite long, so I feel like let's cut to the chase and get into it.
Yeah,
do you have anything that you quickly need to add, put out there for the listeners?
No, sorry.
No?
No, I don't know what to say.
You only have a whole week to think about it. If you've got nothing, let's move on.
No, I got nothing to say, but I love you guys.
I love you guys. Okay, so before I start, I have to say this case... I've been researching this case. I knew that I wanted to do this one when we recorded our last episode, which was like a week and a half ago.
Yep.
So I've been pretty invested in learning about this case in detail the last week and a half, and it's kind of rocked me. I've been a bit jittery lately. I haven't been wanting to be at home.
Is it this case? Is that what's good?
This case.
Yeah. Friday night. I remember what happened Friday night.
What happened Friday night? I've been a scaredy cat. This case has really got to me this
I literally
week.
went out I went down to I think I went to the survey. I was gone for 5 minutes. I come back and you lock all the doors.
Literally every door, every window shut because I was scared. So this one is pretty heavy. I just have to put it out there. I don't normally do a trigger warning because this is a true crime podcast. You kind of know what you're getting into when you listen to these episodes, but this one is quite heavy and there is children involved. It's not the whole thing. This isn't like a case based around children, but there are children involved. And yeah, this one did rock me. So anyway, just have to put that out there. Are we ready?
Tell me, darling.
Very good. So the year is 1974 and our story takes place in the town of Wichita, which is a large western city in Kansas in the USA. The population was around 250,000 people. Friendly neighbours said hello to each other. There was no mobile phones, no computers, and no internet. The town was a generally peaceful, low-crime city, enough that people would often leave their doors unlocked. That was until January 15th, 1974. The Otero family was a loving, caring family. 38-year-old Joseph and 33-year-old Julie were high school sweethearts who had 5 children together. Charlie, 15, Danny, also 15, Carmen, 13, Josephine, 11, and Joseph Jr., 9. Joseph and Julie had a really loving relationship. They really adored each other, and it was the kind of love that everyone hopes for when they get married. It was early in the morning. The neighborhood was covered in white snow. Charlie, the oldest son, had important tests at school that day, so he asked his father to drop him to school early so he could go to the study hall. His brother Danny and sister Carmen went early too, as their dad normally drove them, so to save like the double trip, he took them all at once. They were all gone by roughly 7 a.m. Joseph returned home, and now it was just Joseph, Julie, Josephine, and little Joseph at home.
Mm-hmm.
Good?
Yep.
All right. This story goes 0 to 10 really quick, just so you know.
Yeah, I really like the sounds of it so far. Sounds like you're like your nice family. They got like the family vibes.
Yeah.
Good going on, all happy.
Yeah.
Don't change it.
I'm just warning you, like 0 to 10 really quick.
Damn.
So they're just going about their morning routine when suddenly they're confronted by an intruder who has come in through the back door. He pulled out a gun and pointed it at the family. He told the family that he wanted their car and some food, and then instructed them all to lay face down in the living room. The family's dog at this point is moving around the living room, so the man asked Mr. Otero to put the dog outside. Mr. Otero asked one of the children to put the dog outside, and they do. He then makes...
He gets his kids to put the dogs outside.
Yeah, because he's on the ground with like a gun, so he just says like, go and put the dog outside.
Okay.
Yeah. He then makes the family stand up and go to Joseph and Julie's bedroom. The family are obviously terrified at this point. I mean, like Josephine is only 11 and Joseph is only 9. So the two kids, they're quite young. The man then ties them all up with the rope that he had brought with him. The Otero family are noticeably scared, and they're just doing everything that this man is asking, hoping he takes what he needs and then leaves. Mr. Otero tells the man that the ropes are hurting him and his family, so the man that has broken in loosens them like slightly to help make them comfortable. Mm-hmm. He even places a pillow under Mr. Otero's head because he was hurting from a cracked rib that he had recently suffered in an accident.
That's nice of him to put a pillow under his head.
You'd think, yeah.
While he's robbing him.
And then, with no warning, while the family watched on in horror, the intruder places a plastic bag over Mr. Otero's head and some cord and tightens it. He then moves to the other side of the bed and uses his hands to strangle Mrs. Otero.
Oh, shit.
After Mrs. Otero passes out, he moves on to 11-year-old Josephine and strangles her. She passes out.
Fucker.
He then moves to little Joseph, who is tied up on the floor, and proceeds to put a bag over his head and ties it up. Then Mrs. Otero wakes up, and she's obviously howling at what is going on. She screams at the man, "Save my son." And the man actually goes and removes the bag from Joseph's head. He then walks back over to Julie and strangles her again, but this time with a rope, and this time she doesn't wake up.
Fuck.
Heartbreakingly, once he knew that both Mr. and Mrs. Otero were dead, he picked up little Joseph and took him to his room and again placed a bag over his head, killing him. Horrifyingly, then Josephine wakes back up.
The 11-year-old?
The 11-year-old. The man picks her up and takes her down to the family's basement. Josephine says to the man, "What's going to happen to me?" And he said, "Well, honey, you're going to be in heaven with the rest of your family."
Fucking hell.
He then hangs her from a pipe in the basement.
Just hangs her?
Mm-hmm. He scopes the house, he takes a few souvenirs, and leaves.
We're in some serial killer shit, aren't we?
Yes, we are. So that's what I mean, like 0 to 10, so quick. So the day passes and Charlie, the eldest son who left for school, arrives home. He opens up the back gate to the yard and sees the dog Lucky outside. And he's like, oh, that's strange because it's freezing and it's snowing and usually the dog would be inside.
Mm-hmm.
He goes inside and it was quiet. So he yells out, is anybody here? And one of his siblings who had just returned home before him yells back, Charlie, come quick. Mum and Dad are playing a bad trick on us.
Oh, no.
He walks down the hall and into his parents' bedroom and he's met with a horrifying scene. He sees his mum and dad tied up on the bed, and once his brain computes what he's looking at and he realizes his parents have been brutally murdered, his heart absolutely shatters. He is a mess. He yells at Danny, his brother, to call the police, but the phone line had been cut. So Danny runs next door and calls the police from there. The police arrive and they are not prepared for what they're walking into. Nothing like this has ever happened in Wichita before. Thankfully, Charlie, Danny and Carmen never made it to Joseph's room and they never made it to the basement. So they never seen their brother and sister. It wouldn't actually be until police arrived on scene and Charlie asked where they were that they would tell him that they were in the house too.
Yeah.
So back in 1974, there was no such thing as DNA. There was no DNA testing. It wasn't a practice. It wasn't really a thought. It just wasn't a thing that existed in the early 70s. So after doing a sweep of the house and the basement, at Josephine's feet, there was a pool, some liquid. They weren't really sure what it was. There was no way to test that. However, the crime scene investigator decided to collect it anyway. He used a pillowcase and cut it up into small pieces and dipped it into the liquid and preserved it.
Was it wee?
No. They had no way of knowing what this would be. And they had no way of knowing that this would be the single thing that would link the killer to this crime 31 years later.
Oh, 31 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Shit.
So, who is our killer? Whilst it would take the police department 31 years to discover this, I am going to share with you now who this man is, because when you know all of the aspects of this story from the beginning, you will understand the true horror of it all and why the world was shocked when they would finally learn his name 31 years later.
Okay, tell me.
So, BTK, the infamous serial killer who haunted the town of Wichita in the 70s and 80s, was a man called Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader was born on March 9 in 1945 to parents William and Dorothea. He was the eldest of 3 boys, Paul, Bill and Jeff. 4 boys, sorry. Paul, Bill and Jeff and himself. Dennis's family life at home was one that every child dreamed of. His parents were good and kind. Him and his father were really close. They would often go fishing and on hunting trips. He had a good all-American boyhood. But despite this, Dennis would soon develop some problems that nobody saw coming. In fact, nobody ever knew about. The first time Dennis ever realized that he had a darker side was when he was at home with his mum, Dorothea, and she was vacuuming the living room, and she goes to vacuum the couch, and she puts her hand in to move something or grab something, and her ring on her finger gets caught in the sofa. She starts asking Dennis for help because she's caught, and she's in pain, and he just stands there and he stares at her, and she's like she's in pain, and she's starting to panic.
And he's like, "No, Mum, you'll be right."
Well, he's just staring at her because for the first time in his life, his mother, the strong woman who is normally powerful, was utterly helpless and in pain. And he realized in this moment that he enjoyed seeing people in pain, and this inevitably would be what motivates his future killings.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ugh, some sick puppies out there, isn't there?
Crazy.
Okay. How old was he when this happened, roughly? He was a teenager. Must have been a teenager.
Oh, no, he was young at this point. Yeah. Early.
Mm-hmm.
So after this incident, there was a huge progression in his sexual fantasy life. He started abusing animals. He would
sexually abusing animals?
No, his sexual fantasy life. So I'll explain.
Okay.
He started abusing animals. So he would make traps for them, and he would build a box, right? Like a little trap, and he would put milk inside the box. And then when the cat, they were always
herding
cats.
dogs and cats, not just ants
cats.
and cockroaches.
No.
Oh.
Cats. So he would put like milk and stuff in
Yep.
this box, and as the cat would approach, he'd pull like a string and a box would come down and trap it.
Yep.
But he would cut a hole in the top of the box. So once the cat finished like the milk, he would pop its head up
No. Yeah.
and he would have a noose waiting on top of the hole.
Yep.
And he would hang the cat
Fuck.
as a child.
That's sick.
Yeah. And so seeing them hung would excite him, and he was sexually motivated by this.
I don't get it. Sexually motivated by it.
So it would turn him on.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it would turn him on.
Man, these people need to be caught early and
Well,
done
nobody
with.
knew.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. Dennis Rader went under the radar hard. So he then developed a sexual connection with bondage and rope and tying things up. He loved to play cowboys and Indians and would get aroused when he was captured, or he would capture someone else and tie them up. There was one incident where he snuck over to his 5th grade teacher's house. She was someone who was quite dominant and had power, and he spied through her window, and then he tied himself up with a rope against her fence and imagined her being a victim of his. And for the first time, he comes.
He's only in grade 5.
He's only in grade 5.
He's a sick little puppy.
He's like 10 years
Yeah.
old. So this is the first time he like ever like jizzes
Like just from being tied up.
from the bondage, like the rope, and imagining his like teacher being a victim of his
Wow.
at 10 years old. So with this sexualization of the rope, the sexual fantasy of someone who he wants to have power over, and the ejaculation, this cements the paraphilia. So if you don't know what paraphilia is, it's basically a trigger to arousal which is considered deviant. So like an example of this is like pedophilia.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or like rape or torture. So Dennis went to school. He finished high school and he attended the Kansas Wesleyan University, but his grades were pretty average, so he dropped out after a year and then went to the United States Air Force, where he served 4 years between 1966 and 1970.
Did they a stupid question I was going to say. Did that straighten him up at all? Obviously not. Did he get into any trouble while he was in the Air Force?
No, none.
It's a good boy for that 4 years.
Yes.
Should have stayed there, son.
So, he finished that in 1970. His family and his church were really excited when Dennis returned from the Air Force. They were really welcoming and happy to see him. So Dennis is now 25 years old. He's just come back to his hometown, which is a Midwest country town. And in those days, they were all about church, marriage, and family. His parents introduced Dennis to a girl from their church named Paula Dietz. The two would marry on the 22nd of May, 1971.
Wow.
Yeah. Shortly after, Dennis landed his dream job at Cessna, where his role was to assist in building aircrafts. But just as quickly had he gotten this role, he lost it. And this was huge for him. This really made Dennis feel like a failure. It was a huge blow to his ego and was probably the beginning of the end for Dennis. The day Dennis was laid off, he was mad, he was frustrated, and he was frustrated with the system. He decided that he wanted to get back at it. So that night he goes on the prowl and broke into his first home. This was almost an experiment for him. Nobody was home at this particular home, but he would experiment and practice breaking in places. He would break glass to see how loud it was or how much force it needed to be broken in, and attempt different ways at getting inside a home so that he could learn the best way. He then started watching people and learning their routines and coming up with plans to create the perfect break-in scenario, which leads us to January in 1974.
What's his wife doing, like, while he's doing all this shit? Like, is he just doing this during the day, the night? Is he sneaking out at night? And the wife's like,
Yeah.
oh, what are you up today?
She's a housewife, yeah. She had no idea.
No idea
would
he was
just be
out
like,
just
yeah,
sneaking
sorry,
around.
I'm late from
I'm-
work, or, he'd do it on
But
his lunch
was he
break.
what was he doing for work during this time? Because he got laid off. Didn't he?
He gets a job as, it comes up.
Okay.
I'll tell you soon.
Yep.
So, January 1974. Dennis was driving his wife to work when he spotted a woman and her daughter walking down the street. He immediately decided that she would be his target and stalked her for a while. He would drive up and down the street watching the house and basically learnt her routine, and that woman would come to be known as Julie Otero. Rader would later admit that she was his only intended target, and his original plan was to kidnap her and take her to a barn where he planned to hang her.
What
Mr. Otero wasn't supposed to be home, and the two younger children were just collateral damage.
Did he know that she had like a whole family, or did he just think it was just her and the daughter?
No, because he stalked her.
Okay.
He stalked her for like.
Yep.
He learnt her routine.
Cool, and
He
he
knew
thought
when the
it's
kids
just
were
gonna
at school,
be
when Joseph was at work. But on this particular day, the two elder kids went to school super early.
Yep.
And Joseph didn't go to work.
Yeah. Shit. Wrong place, wrong time.
They were
for the
at
rest
home.
of the family.
They were not wrong place, wrong time. They were at home, where you're supposed to feel safe, which is, I think, why I feel really like uneasy this week, because they were just at home doing their own thing, you know.
And what about probably jumping the gun? But was this his first?
Yes.
And then it obviously goes on for a while before he's found 30 years later.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So 3 months after the murder of the Otero family, Rader would come across his next victim.
Just quickly back to the family, because
Yes.
they matter. What where did the older kids go?
I believe they went to stay with family. There's not a lot on Danny and Carmen, like the two younger children. Charlie, he definitely went through a hard time.
Of
He
course.
kind of fell into a bit of like getting in trouble with the law and things like that. He was just angry. He was a very angry person until Dennis was eventually found,
Okay.
I would say.
We'll get to that though, will we?
Yeah.
Okay.
But this, that's kind of it on the Otero
All right.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's traumatized.
Of course.
Absolutely traumatized. There's interviews of him like recently where you can go and watch them, and he kind of tells his story, but he was very traumatized and heartbroken and angry. Okay, so Rader had driven, so we're in April now, April 4th, 1974. Rader had driven past 21-year-old Catherine Bright as she was coming home from school one day. She went to the university and he
How old was she? 24?
21.
21. A uni, yep.
At uni. So he watched her enter her home and he basically liked the look of her, and he decided that she was perfect. So he stalked her for a while and learnt her movements, and then on April 4th, he broke into her home and waited for her to come home. Around 2:30 p.m., Catherine returned home, but she wasn't alone. She was with her 19-year-old brother, Kevin. As they walked in the home, Rader came rushing out of a room with a gun pointing straight at them. He told them the same story that he told the Oteros, that he was a criminal, he was a wanted criminal, he needed a car, food, money, because he was on his way to New York. He forced the two into the bedroom and ordered Kevin to tie his sister's hands and feet. He then took Kevin into the other room and tried to tie him up as well, but was not successful. Kevin stands up and gets into a fight with Rader, getting very close to taking the gun from him. But Rader was able to get a good hold on the gun and shot Kevin in the head twice. After that, he went back to Catherine to finish what he would call his projects. Catherine fought really hard for her life against Rader as he tried to strangle her, but she was really fighting back, like giving it everything she had. And he decided that strangling her was not going to work. So he got a knife and he stabbed her in the stomach 2 or 3 times. Suddenly, Rader hears the front door open and close. At first, he thinks, oh, the police are here, like I'm caught, that's it, it's over. He runs out to see Kevin running down the porch and out onto the street.
Hold on. Kevin that he shot in the head.
Twice.
Damn.
Yeah, he survived. Dennis grabs his things and he just runs. Like he leaves and runs to his car, which is parked a little while away, and he gets out of there.
Kevin survived.
Kevin survives. Unfortunately, Catherine dies from the stabbing wounds. So Kevin survived the attack, but unfortunately for Catherine, she did not. Kevin was able to give the police a description of the man who attacked him, and he described him as a white male with a mustache. But it was the 70s and a lot of men fit that description.
Everyone would have had a mustache back then.
The sketch was put into a local newspaper and Rader loved that. He loved the attention, and that would ultimately, in the end, be his downfall.
Yep.
So after the Otero murders and Catherine's murder, the newspaper reports that 3 people had been arrested in relation to the Otero murders, and Dennis hated this. He loved attention, he craved it, and so for someone else to get credit for his work was unforgivable to him.
Oh, man, that's a sick mindset, as in the fucked up. Like, so he's mad that other people are being caught. Wouldn't you think, oh, I'm happy someone else has been...
No.
Because it's like, oh, it takes the pressure.
No, because he wants the attention. He wants people to know, like, he is there and to, like, fear him.
But the thing that also sucks, well, obviously those people were just taken in for questioning. Were they arrested?
They were arrested, but obviously, like...
The things are going to keep happening. So
Yes.
at first, the community might feel, safe.
Well, the
But
community doesn't really know
they don't know yet.
at the moment, yeah.
Now, you're going to hate me for this, but was Dennis driving around like in a sus-looking car back then? Like, now, like if I'm around and I see a car, I'd think,
Yeah.
like I just think that car's fucking sus. Like I'll eye it off and look at the driver and be like,
No, he wasn't. And
it was a nice car, like a family car.
It will come up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good on you.
So, in October of 1974, a man who worked at the Wichita Eagle and Beacon, which was a news station, received a telephone call telling him that there was a letter related to the Otera case located on the second floor in the public library in an engineering textbook. Detective Bernie Derwotsky was assigned to go and look for the letter, and he found it. The letter started out as, "I write this letter to you for the sake of the taxpayer as well as your time. Those 3 dudes you have in custody are just talking to get publicity for the Otera murders. They know nothing at all. I did it by myself, with no one's help. There has been no talk either. Let's put this straight." He then goes on to describe the murder scene in detail. Who was where, who was tied up and how, what they were wearing, exactly how they died, and it was pretty obvious to police that whoever wrote this had to have committed the crime. At the end of the letter, he writes, "The code words for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK." So he names himself BTK.
Bind them, torture, kill them.
Kill them.
This reminds me of like those movies. Like what's one of those movies? Is it Seven? With like Brad Pitt and what's his name? And Morgan Freeman?
Oh,
Whoever
that movie.
You know how the killer, like before that technology, the killer's like toying with them, leaving little clues here and there.
It's exactly like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So after the letter was sent, Dennis went radio silent for 3 years.
Oh,
Yeah.
long time.
The police didn't know this, but it was during this time he had started a family. He had gotten a job at a security company and was basically just preoccupied with work life and family and didn't have time to kill anybody.
How do you just go from killing people to then I'm going to go be chill with my family for 3 years?
Yeah.
And be a family man.
Yep. But he still indulged in deviant activities while installing security systems. He would go through people's homes, particularly women's.
Yeah, that's the worst job for him to have.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's a good job for him.
Good job for him.
Bad job for the houses he's installing.
Yep. Anyway, he would go through women's closets and he would steal their panties and hosiery items, and he would take them home, and when he was alone, he would wear them. So during this period, Dennis would still patrol the neighborhood, looking for targets, picking people and watching them, learning their routine. He never stopped doing that. So quiet, but still actively looking kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is kind of the scariest thing about Dennis. He, on the outside, a perfect Samaritan family man, church man, great husband and father kind of thing. Very
It's the
scary.
churchgoers you can't trust.
Oh, stop.
So,
On March 17 of 1977, the pressure of not killing had built to the point where Rader couldn't contain it anymore. He was ready to kill again.
Yeah.
So he dresses himself up in a nice suit with a briefcase.
I thought you were about to say like lingerie.
No.
Goes out killing in lingerie.
And begins walking around the neighborhood. He walks to the first home, which he had labeled as Project Green. Project Green, sorry. He wasn't an opportunist generally. He meticulously planned every kill, so he knew ahead of time which homes he wanted to target. So he basically had a list, and he would call them projects, like Project Green, Project Black kind of thing.
The colours like has he got them labelled because like Project Green is like could be an easy one, like it's green, like
No,
go,
it's
black's
more like,
harder, or it's
it could be like that she had a lot of trees in the front yard or something like that, or like Project Piano, she played the piano kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he had it all listed. He had a list and all their schedule. So he wasn't really an opportunist. He planned everything. So like he knew ahead of time which homes he wanted to target. So he walks up to the first home, Project Green, and he knocks on the door and no one answers. So he figured, oh, well, I'll just try the next one. So he goes down the street and tries another couple of houses on the list, but no one's home. But he is all dressed up. He is in the mood and he is not going to waste a day.
So his plan today is just to go out, knock on someone's door and kill whoever's home.
On the list. But he's not having much luck in this street.
Yep.
But he's like, I'm not wasting a day. I'm dressed up. I got my kill kit. Someone's going to die today. So he goes down the street and he tries another couple of houses. No one's home. And then he's walking down the street and he sees a little boy. And he figures if there's a boy here, then there must be a mother at home. The boy was 6-year-old Stephen, and Stephen was coming home from the store after going to get a can of soup for his mum who was at home sick in bed. Dennis stops Stephen and shows him a picture. It's a woman and a child, and he asks Stephen if he knew who they were, and Stephen says, "No, sir." And then Steve leaves and goes home. About 15 minutes later, there is a knock on the door.
Don't answer
Stephen opens the door and the man he just met is standing there. He pushes past Stephen and shuts the door behind him. He lowers the blinds and turns off the TV.
That'd be so scary for that little
So scary. Dennis then pulls out a gun, a .357 Magnum. Shirley Vianne, who was Stephen's mother, comes out and sees Dennis standing in the living room. He tells her that he had some sexual problems and that he would need to tie her up and basically have sex with her. He also said that he might have to tie the children up. So they walked back to her bedroom and Shirley was scared and nervous. She even smoked a cigarette. He then explained to her that he had done this before and that everything would be fine if she just did as he said. So then Dennis started to tie the kids up and they are screaming.
What other kids were there?
I think there was 2 children.
Okay.
So Stephen and then the youngest.
Yep.
So they are screaming. They're so scared and they're so upset. And he decides this isn't going to work. So he decides that he's going to lock them up in the bathroom. So Shirley, their mother, even helps him do this. They tie the door shut on one side and then on the other door, I'm assuming it's like a walk-through bathroom. Yeah. On the other door, Shirley helps Dennis push a bed up against the door so that they can't get out. They even put in some toys and blankets to help keep the children comfortable while they're in there. I cannot imagine what she's thinking doing this. I know what she's thinking.
She's just thinking, I need to get through this. Hopefully, it's all it is just...
Yeah, but get my kids in the bathroom. She's pushing the bed up. And, I can imagine that she's as long as my kids are in here, they'll be safe. They won't be able to see. They won't know what's going on. Just protect the children.
Yeah, that's fucked.
Awful. Meanwhile, she's, not well. So Dennis proceeds to tie Shirley up. And she ends up being sick. She throws up.
Whoa.
Which I'm not sure whether it's because she is already sick,
a combination
or
of everything,
if she's sick with fear, she throws up because she's so scared. So he goes to the kitchen and he gets her a glass of water and he lets her drink it, and then he comforts her, makes her comfortable, finishes tying her up, and then he puts a bag over her head and strangles her.
He doesn't rape her, just strangles her?
No. So he is not a rapist. He doesn't rape any of his victims. It is them dying or the fear in their eyes that gets him off. So he kills her and he leaves.
Leaves the kids? Doesn't kill the kids?
He leaves the kids in the bathroom. And
oh, man.
Yeah. So after Shirley's murder, BTK would go quiet again, but only until he spotted another perfect victim. It's now December of 1977. BTK has murdered 6 people. And not a single person suspects a thing. He's feeling powerful. He's feeling untouchable. But there's no denying that he's had some close calls. So he decided that his next project, his next kill, has to be perfect. Everything has to align or he won't go ahead. So BTK is on the prowl. He's driving through the neighborhood and down a street when a young woman comes into his eyesight. She's young, petite, blonde. She, was perfect for him. Her name was Nancy Fox. From then on, he stalked her, even went as far as to go to her workplace. She worked at the mall. He would go to the mall and pretend to be a customer shopping for gifts, and he would talk to her.
Man, that's sick.
So sick. He learnt her routine, and on December 8th, 1977, 9 months after the murder of Shirley Vianne, he broke into Nancy Fox's house and waited for her to come home. He learnt her routine, and on December 8th, 1977, 9 months after the murder of Shirley Vianne, he broke into Nancy Fox's house and waited for her to come home. When Nancy got home, she walked through the door and Dennis was sitting waiting for her. Which, fucking terrifying.
Yeah. Hey, didn't you just buy something from me?
So she sees him and startled. She's like, what do you want? And he tells her the same story that he told the others. He's a strange dude. I'm going to do some stuff with you. If you cooperate, you'll be fine. Nancy was upset. You can imagine what's going through her mind as she mentally prepares for what she thinks is probably going to be like a traumatic rape.
Yeah.
She has a cigarette. They sit and talk for a while, and then she looks at him and says, "Let's get this over with so I can call the police." So Dennis takes her up to the bedroom. He ties her up like the other victims before her, but he doesn't rape her. In fact, he doesn't rape any of his victims. He says that rape is a step too far. Crazy, right?
Yeah, super crazy.
He mentally tortures her. He's instilling the fear into her as she doesn't already have enough, because this is what he does. And for that quick glimpse of fear on a person's face, like right before he kills them, that is the high that he's chasing with every kill. He then puts his hands around her throat and he leans in and says, "I'm BTK. I'm a bad guy," and then strangles her to death. After she dies, he then proceeds to masturbate over her body and then leave. He goes home, apologizes to his wife for being late, and says he had car trouble. The next day, he goes into town to a public payphone and he calls the police. He tells the dispatcher that they will find a homicide at 843 South Pershing, Nancy Fox, then leaves the phone booth. He wanted people to find her. He wanted people to know BTK had struck again. He wanted attention and fame. He wanted people to know his name.
Wow.
He was an attention whore.
Is there a movie on this guy? Is there anything?
No movies, lots of documentaries.
There's
lots of docos.
like on Netflix and things.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah. I think it's like Catching a Killer, and like episode 1 is like BTK.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he like doesn't rape them, but after they die, he like
does
self-pleasures, which is what was under 11-year-old Josephine on the floor, if you didn't put that together.
Yeah.
So a couple of months...
what a sick fuck.
Yeah, it's crazy. So a couple of months after Nancy's death, it is February 10, 1978. A letter from BTK arrives at Cake ABC News, and the letter is BTK claiming responsibility for Nancy Fox, with chilling details of the crime and how he killed her. Mm-hmm. The letter then says, "How many people do I have to kill before I get my name in the paper?" He was desperate for attention. He wanted to be like the other serial killers before him, like famous and known, because at this point, no one had reported on him. The police were like keeping this low.
What about, was this around the same time as, what was that one that was it in LA or was it all over America as well? We watched a documentary on that one together ages ago.
Ted Bundy?
Not Ted Bundy, the other one.
I really don't know.
There's so many of them.
There's so many.
Yeah.
The 70s were pretty bad for it.
Yeah. Okay. Carry on.
Okay. So it was, I don't know exactly the timeline of those, but at this point, I know like the term serial killer wasn't a thing.
Oh.
Wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were around. It just didn't have a name for it yet. Mm-hmm. It was at this time that the police decided that it was finally time to let the city of Wichita know that there was a killer on the loose, and to basically warn them that they needed to remain vigilant. The city was in danger. 7 people had been murdered, and police had absolutely no idea who the man was that was responsible. So Dennis Rader, BTK, finally got the recognition he was so desperately wanting. The town was buzzing with this news. It was spreading like wildfire, and people were scared, and he reveled in this. He loved it. In April of 1979, Dennis breaks into the home of a 63-year-old woman, and he waits for her. But the woman never comes home, so he leaves. She comes home the next morning, and she ended up staying at her sister's house the night before, which is why she never made it home. Mm-hmm. And a little while after, I'm not exactly sure of the timeline, but it was a little while after, like weeks or months, BTK sends this poor woman a letter telling her that he was there and he waited for her. Was like, I was in your house and I was going to kill you, basically. How, scary would that be? So the woman was so scared that he would come back for her that she ended up moving out of the state.
Well, out of the whole state.
Yeah, she was petrified because nobody knew who this man was, and he killed 7 people at this point.
Yep.
And only in this town.
Yep.
So after this, BTK would again go quiet until 1985, so 6 years later.
Yep.
April of 1985. Dennis, for some reason, set his sights on his 53-year-old neighbour, Maureen Hedge. Maureen was a widow and described as gentle and a kind woman.
That's too close to home.
Maureen and Dennis had lived on the same block in Park City for over 30 years. They weren't like a close, like friendly, like they weren't friends, but like they would wave here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But as we know, like once he really decides that someone is a hit, then that's all he can think about. So Dennis at this time was heavily involved in the church and was also a Boy Scout leader for his son's scout group. On April 27th, Dennis was actually at a Boy Scout meeting when he stated that he had a headache and needed to leave to get medicine. He left and walked to his car that was near a bowling alley.
He wasn't going to get medicine.
No, he wasn't. He went inside and bought a beer. He swished the beer in his mouth and then spit it out, purposely spilling some of his clothes, giving onlookers the illusion that he had been drinking. He then called a cab, pretending to be drunk, and told the driver to take him to Park City. Once he got to Maureen's home, he saw her car and assumed she was home. He cut the phone line like usual and quietly opened the back door to sneak in.
So this is his neighbour's house.
Yes.
He's right next door to his own house.
She's like 2 or 3 doors down.
Okay.
He realised no one was home and waited in the bedroom until he saw a car pull up into the driveway. Maureen Hedge and another man walked into the house. Rader waited in the bedroom closet until 1 a.m, until the man with Maureen had left and Maureen had gone to sleep. Once asleep, Dennis came out of the cupboard.
How old's this Marine lady?
53, I think I said.
53. Okay, yep.
So once she was asleep, Dennis came out of the cupboard and turned on the bathroom light so that he could see, and jumped on top of Maureen and choked her to death.
Far out.
Once she had died, he dragged her body outside into the trunk of her car. He drove to the church that he went to regularly.
What?
Yep. And because he was a trusted member, he had keys to the building. He put black plastic over the window so no one could look inside. Then he dragged her body to the basement of the church. He photographed the body in multiple different poses before putting her body back in the trunk of his car and taking off. He then dumped Maureen's body in a ditch along the dirt road not far from their home in Park City.
Okay, well now what's going on here is a little bit different to the other ones. Rather than just keeping them where they are,
Yeah.
what's the reasoning behind taking her to the church? Again, and what type of camera is he using back then?
Polaroid.
Polaroid, like obviously it's a film camera.
Polaroid.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, like Polaroid, and it like prints out straight away.
Yeah, well, where is he going to get them printed? At a Photoshop?
Oh yeah, they get caught.
Yeah, Polaroid.
You just print this one.
No.
Okay.
He's just a sick fuck.
He is.
I don't know what else to say to you. He's just a sick fuck. So, over a year after Maureen's murder, it's September 1986.
What's going on in that year? Has there been any like?
He's just being a dad.
But I mean, like on her murder, was there like?
The police are investigating. They know it's BTK, but they don't know who he is. They don't have DNA testing. There's no security cameras really. Like,
did a new family move into her house? Do we know that?
I don't know that.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah,
I assume eventually, but
yeah, imagine that, like moving to the house. Oh, we got to tell you, some lady was killed in here.
Well, they don't. I wonder if they know that she was killed in the home.
Yeah, might not know.
Because she wasn't found in the home.
Yep.
Okay, so over a year after Maureen's murder, it's September 1986, and Dennis set his sights on Vicky Wegerly, 28 at the time, and a mother of 2. He would walk by her house during the day and listen to her play the piano. This is where she got the name Project Piano in his list of things.
Did you have like a little book?
Yes, a notepad. At 10 a.m. on September 16th, Dennis dresses up as a telephone repairman and knocks on Vicky's door. He tells her that he's working on telephone repairs and asked if he could come check the phone line, and she says yes. She lets him in. He pretends to look at the phone line when he's actually cutting the phone line instead. When she wasn't looking, he pulled out a gun and pointed it at her until she turned around. Once Vicky turns around and sees that he has a gun, he tells her to go to the bedroom, and she does. She's scared and she's upset, and he uses some material that was in the bedroom to tie her up, but she breaks free and they begin fighting. Vicky fought back hard. She left cuts and scratches on him. Dennis ended up getting a nylon sock and managed to get it around her throat, choking her. After that, he took photos of the body in different positions, then he left, stealing the family car.
Mm-hmm.
Not long after Dennis leaves, Bill Wiggly, Vicky's husband, arrives home. When he arrives home, he sees his 2-year-old son by himself in the living room.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. The whole time Vicky was fighting for her life, the 2-year-old was in the living room.
Yeah.
Bill searched the house for his wife and soon found her on the floor behind the bed in the bedroom. She was breathing, but barely. Vicky was rushed to the hospital, but sadly was pronounced dead a few hours after. So she doesn't make it, sadly.
Yeah.
Police were originally suspicious of Vicky's husband, but eventually ruled him out because Vicky's husband had come home and found Vicky and untied her in an attempt to revive her. When police arrived on scene, the links between Vicky's attempted murder and BTK were never made, and police never put them together.
How? Like,
because
if it's
she wasn't bound. Like,
okay,
it wasn't like.
It wasn't like it's a typical BTK.
Yeah, they were like when the first responders got there, like, or like, you know, they weren't able to. It wasn't a murder scene when they first got there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was like, you know what I mean. So they didn't take photos of this crime scene the same way that they do at all the other houses.
Okay.
And which is why her husband was suspected. So after the murder of Vicky, BTK would go silent for 6 years.
Another 6 years.
Yeah. And would resurface again in January of 1991 when he spotted a woman named Dolores Davis who lived only a mile away from him. Dolores D. Davis was 62. She was born in 1928 in Stella, Nebraska.
How old's he now? So, because wasn't he 30 something when he started?
He was 25 when he started.
Oh, 25. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So she was born in Nebraska. She was raised on a farm. She was an excellent cook who made everything from scratch in 1961. Made everything from scratch in 1961. After 12 years of marriage, a son and a daughter, Dee and her husband Harry divorced. She was a fun, protective and devoted mother and grandmother adored by her family. Jeff, her son, always spoke to his mother on the phone on the weekends for hours. She adored her family and her family adored her, but sadly her time with them would be cut short when she became the 10th and final victim of the serial killer BTK.
Mm-hmm.
January 19, 1991 began as a busy day for Dennis Rader. He had a very well thought out plan to get what would be his last victim. He was going camping with the Boy Scouts over the weekend.
Just quickly, sorry. Did he know that this was going to be his last victim? Was he like, I'm going to retire after this, or is it just...
No, he didn't know.
Okay.
It just ended up would being.
Mm-hmm.
So he was going camping with the Boy Scouts over the weekend. Whilst on the trip, he came up with an excuse to slip away from one of the scout meetings.
How are they
His
not all
children
sus on
are
him?
here.
Yeah, his children there. Oh, I've got a headache, or I've got to get out of this. It's not adding up.
But it's not that out of the ordinary.
Yeah,
if someone's
it is.
somewhere and they're just like, oh, sorry, I just got to quickly go here. You're not going to think anything of it. Like on the outside, he was a family man. He was a church man. He was like well known in his community, which is like the scary thing.
Did he go to, so because he went to church, did he think, like, is this like, oh, you might get to it later, but is this like, was he doing like God's work? Was he like,
No.
he wasn't like possessed, he didn't think he was possessed or told that he needed to be doing this stuff?
No.
He's just a sick fuck.
Yes.
Okay.
So he drove his car to his parents' house to change out of his scout uniform and into his hit clothes, as he would call them.
Mm-hmm.
He then drove to the Baptist church in Park City to park his car and finish his plan out on foot. Once he got to the Davis house, he waited outside until he saw that she was asleep. He broke the glass door at the back of the house with a cement block that he'd found. Dolores, who had heard the noise and thought maybe someone had crashed into her home, came out of the bedroom and found Rader. He used the same line as he had almost every time, saying that he needed money, a car, food, and that he was going to tie her up. He tied her up in the bedroom and strangled her to death. Rader took the body outside and put it in the trunk of her own car. He drove to a lake near Park City and hid the body and evidence under some trees. He drove the car back to Davis's house, wiped it down for fingerprints, and then left to go back to the church. He went back to where he hid the body, put it in his trunk, and dumped the body under a bridge in Sedgwick County. Rader then went somewhere to change back into his scout uniform and returned back to the camp. The following evening, he went back to where he left the body and took photographs of it. Dee's body wouldn't be found until 13 days later, on February 1st, 1991.
And did he make any calls to the police or to the newspapers on this one?
No.
Mm-hmm.
BTK would go silent again, but this time for years. January 15th, 2004 came, and it would mark the 30-year anniversary of the Otero family murder, which was still very much a cold case. They had absolutely no leads, and BTK had essentially disappeared and hadn't killed for 13 years, although no one had actually linked him to Dolores's murder. So to the police, they had the impression that it had been 18 years since BTK had last killed, because they didn't link those together.
Such a long time.
Yeah. So, being the 30th anniversary of such a huge case, one of the local newspapers did a story on it. It read something along the lines of BTK case unsolved 30 years later. It also mentioned that an attorney wanted to write a book on BTK and his crimes, and Dennis wasn't happy about this. He didn't want a book to be written that wouldn't be factual or capture his legacy right, because he still didn't have credit for some of those murders.
Mm-hmm.
So, for the first time in 25 years, BTK would send another letter to a local news station.
Whoa.
Inside the letter was a photocopy of a Polaroid of a woman's body on the floor and a license. This license belonged to Vicky Wiggly, because they didn't link those two together.
Yep.
So he's claiming Vicky. So as you can imagine, the city was once again thrown into chaos. People were scared. He was back. During the time of his silence, people assumed that he'd gone to prison or even died, and they kind of forgot about him. May 10th, 2004, the Wichita Police Force formed a task force dedicated to BTK. Things had changed and advanced since the 70s.
Yeah, hell
and there
yeah.
were more resources. There was computers, DNA testing, internet.
Cameras, yeah, all that.
Yeah.
He going down.
Yeah. So, May 2004, BTK sends a word puzzle full of letters and numbers to Cake TV, which is the news place. It was a word search, and the idea was that in the puzzle there might be clues to who he was and his identity. This was a game to Dennis. He loved this, and he thought it was fun. This game of cat and mouse was everything to him, and because he had gotten away with it for so long, it was everything to his ego also.
And is he still with his wife?
Yep.
Wow, man. I
Still
wonder
with his
how
wife.
she feels when he got caught.
His children are grown. He's like walked his daughter down the aisle. Like, he was the dad that took them camping, fishing. He built cubby houses in the backyard. Like, his appearance.
Proper living that double life.
Double life, yep. So this was a game to him, and he loved to play cat and mouse with the police. Some of the words discovered in the word puzzle were victim, serviceman, ruse, telephone, model, 6220, and address. He was extremely cocky at this point, and he completely disregarded the fact that he'd killed real people in terrible ways. He's killed children, basically. So between 2004 and 2005, BTK would send police packages. 2 were cereal boxes for serial killer.
Yeah.
Funny, haha. And inside the first one was a doll that he had tied up the same way that he tied up his victims. It also included Nancy Fox's real driver's license. The second one contained a note, and the note said, "Can I communicate with Floppy and it not be traced to a computer? Be honest. I will try a floppy for a test run in the near future. February or March. BTK."
Like he was going to put all the information on a floppy disk.
He was going to start communicating via a floppy disk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was an entirely bad strategy on his part, because a lot of people didn't know this at the time, because it was all like new technology. But when you first insert a floppy into a computer, the computer will save its details to the floppy.
Yep.
And he didn't realize this. So BTK...
Idiot.
Yeah. BTK told police to respond by taking out an ad in the paper and to address it to Rex. After a discussion within the force unit, the decision was made that they were not going to be honest with him. And so they place an ad and they say, "Rex, it'll be okay."
Got it.
So back to the second package. It was found on an employee's car in the parking lot of Home Depot. And because it was 2005 and technology had advanced, they had
cameras and
cameras.
they caught him.
So police were able to find footage of BTK
Oh,
coming
wait, how
into
old
the
is he
parking
now?
lot.
Well, how old is he in 2005?
He's in his 50s.
Yeah, he's old now.
They were able to see him coming into the parking lot, dropping off the package and leaving. Now, this footage was grainy. It was very grainy.
What?
You couldn't make out him.
Really?
No.
Was he have like hoodie on as well? Was he trying to be
No.
sus about it, or did he have his
No.
like kill suit on?
No, just dressed
Normal.
very blurry.
Yeah, yep.
They watched this footage repeatedly over and over and over because they really wanted to catch this man. Like the police wanted to catch him. The footage is super grainy and you can't see a lot, but the footage was sent away and reviewed. and it came back that the car was a Jeep Cherokee.
Oh.
So this was huge. They
Oh,
finally
but this
had
is
a car.
in 2005 though.
Yeah.
What was he driving back then? You know, when
A Jeep Cherokee.
Oh, so it's his same car.
This is their family car.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. He hadn't upgraded in all these years. Thought he would have upgraded. You know, from 74
I mean, that's
to
possible, but like he had a Jeep Cherokee for like this particular time.
Okay. I want to know what he's driving back then.
Okay.
That's all right. Keep going.
2 weeks after putting the ad in the paper, Fox TV station got a package in the mail. The detectives working the case glove up and they open it. And inside is a little postcard and a floppy disk.
Mm-hmm.
They waste no time inserting this floppy disk into a computer. There is 20 or 30 people surrounding this thing and anticipating what might be on it, praying and hoping that this is going to be the thing that reveals who BTK is. They insert the floppy and there's one Word document, and on it it's labeled test. They click on it and the software is licensed to Christ Lutheran Church, and this document was printed by a user named Dennis.
Oh, what an idiot.
So immediately they jump on the internet and they search for Christ Lutheran Church and the name Dennis, and it comes up with the president of the congregation and a big fat photo of Dennis Rader.
Wow.
They run his name through the national database, but there's no criminal history whatsoever. He appeared to be a normal guy. They get his address and the detectives are out the door on their way. They want to do a drive-by. Tim Ralph, one of the detectives, is the first to get to Dennis's house, which there's 3 main detectives in this task. Lots of people.
Yeah.
3 main ones. They're fucking racing. They all want to be the first one to get there.
They crash.
Tim just gets there first. So the other 2 have to call back.
Yeah.
He does the drive-by, and in the driveway, he sees the Cherokee. Mm-hmm. So immediately, he's on the phone, and he's like calling the lieutenant.
So this is a drive-by. He's not actually there to try and make an arrest or bring him in just yet.
Let me finish. He's on the phone, and he's like, get everyone down here. It's him. It's time to go. Like, he's inside. The car's there. And the lieutenant says, stop. You need to come back. And he's like, fuck, man. Like, he's right there.
Yeah.
But he has to turn around because...
But they need more evidence, do they?
Yes, although they know that they have their men, they didn't have enough evidence to arrest him.
Mm-hmm.
Everything at the moment was circumstantial, but this is everything that they've been working towards for 30 years, so they were not about to give up. They knew that they needed Dennis's DNA to tie him to the murders because they had perfect DNA from the Otero murder and the murder of Nancy Fox. They just needed something to compare it to. Police discover that Dennis has a daughter who attended Kansas State University, and most female students who attend here are offered free health checks, and their DNA would be often collected during this process. Mm-hmm. So the police take action and they were able to seize that DNA. A familiar match would be enough to get a warrant for Dennis's DNA. So they test the DNA of Dennis Radar's daughter and it's a match.
Is this all same day? It's obviously on same day, is it?
No, it's like 2 to 3 days, I believe, for the testing.
So they're doing it quick.
At least that, yeah, they are not fucking around.
Yeah.
Because I didn't put this in there, but in like the recent letter that he sent to the news station, he mentions that he's been watching a young girl. Okay. So they're really scared that he's about to strike again on a child. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it comes back a match. Dennis Rader is BTK.
Yep.
So the police force set themselves up. So it's February 25th, 2005. Yep. Mm-hmm. And it's the day of the arrest.
Yep.
The police force set themselves up on a side street just a few streets away from Dennis's home. They waited for him to be driving home. There's a police helicopter watching from the sky. And communicating like where Dennis is to the police below.
Yeah.
So they knew he was on his way. He turns into the side street and immediately police cars swarm him and he stops. One detective stands in the front of his car with a 12-gauge shotgun and the other detective grabs him and pulls Dennis out of the truck and puts him face down on the ground and cuff him. As the detectives are getting ready to move him, he looks at them and says, do you want to guess what he says? Have a go.
Yeah, he says, so they've got him, about to cuff him, and he goes, he'll look up and he'll be like, what took you so long? Yeah?
No.
Oh.
He says, gentlemen, would somebody please go tell my wife I won't be home for lunch? I assume you know where I live.
Oh, wow. Like calm and collected?
Yep.
So...
Yep.
Wow.
Very calm and collected. So on February 26th, Police Chief Norman Williams announced in a televised newscast that BTK is arrested.
Yeah.
And the fucking crowd goes wild, let me tell you.
Is there a video of his arrest? Is there was it like broadcast like the helicopter?
I believe there's like helicopter photos. I don't know if there's like, I didn't find video footage. But there's video of like this announcement and like, the crowd goes wild. They're very happy because they have been living in fear through like the 70s and the 80s. And then it kind of quieted down because they were like, maybe he's dead. Maybe he's in jail. And then when he came back in 2004, they're immediately thrown back in this like trauma state again. Yeah. So during the interrogation, Dennis asked police how he was caught because he was cocky and he thought that he was the smartest person in the room. Police told Dennis how they used his daughter's DNA to match to his, and that's how they were able to catch him.
Yeah.
And with that, they're like, so why don't you just say who you are? Just say it. Like, say your name. The police like need this for his confession. Yeah. And he says BTK.
Yeah.
After this, he talks for hours. This is a man who has kept this secret for 30 years. This is his greatest accomplishment of his life, and he's never been able to talk about it. So he tells them everything, every detail, how, who, why. He had absolutely no remorse for the killings. And on June 27th, Dennis Rader pleads guilty to the murder of 10 people. He was sentenced to a minimum of 175 years in a prison at the El Dorado Correctional Facility, where he remains today in solitary confinement at the age of 78. Today.
He gonna die in prison, of course.
175 years.
Is he hated in prison?
Yes, he is in solitary confinement for his safety.
For his own safety?
Yes.
Let's let him out with everyone else is what they should do.
I agree. I absolutely agree. So after Dennis Rader's sentencing, a woman by the name of Dr. Catherine Ransland, who was a professor of forensic psychology, was invited in to study Dennis and to learn more about him in a study to help professionals learn more about serial killers and why they do what they do. Over the last decade, she's entered the mind of a killer, forging a relationship with Dennis, BTK, to uncover confessions and learn the most precise details of his mental state during his killing spree that we probably wouldn't know if not for her work. So she's involved in the, like that documentary that I talked about. Like you can hear him talking on the phone with her. Like it's very like in real time. She was the one that like got the story about like how his mother's ring got caught in the lounge. Like, she found out a lot of information about all his like young like childhood life and things like that. And her biggest thing I think with Dennis was to prove that like, you know, most people see serial killers and like they've come from like a hard upbringing and they've been abused as a child. And
this wasn't the case.
Wasn't the case. So she's kind of just opening like police and professionals' eyes into the fact that like you can't box serial killers in this stereotype because he is like a prime.
Could be anyone.
Like he was great childhood, great father, great husband, and then on the flip side could just switch off like that. So I want to end the episode by acknowledging the victims and honouring their memory. Joseph Otero, Julie Otero, Josephine Otero, Josephine Jr. Otero, Catherine Bright, Shirley Vian Relford, Nancy Fox, Maureen Hedge, Vicky Wiggly, and Dolores Davis. 10 souls whose lives were tragically extinguished by the monstrous acts of a killer. Each of them had dreams, aspirations, and loved ones who cherished them deeply. As we remember them, let us honor them for the unique individuals they were, and for the immeasurable void their absence has left behind. May their names eternally resonate, serving as a reminder to protect the vulnerable, seek justice for the innocent, and cherish every precious life. May their legacies inspire us to build a world where such horrors are never repeated, and where love and compassion prevail over darkness. And that is the case of serial killer BTK.
What did his wife and kids think of this when all that happened?
The day he was arrested, she filed for an emergency divorce and she was granted within hours.
An emergency divorce?
Emergency divorce.
Is that what it was called?
At the time, yes. I don't know what it is now, but she
applied. Not an immediate divorce, emergency divorce.
Emergency, which means like immediate. And within hours it was granted.
Yeah.
She was fucking traumatized.
And she was out of there?
Yeah, she hasn't done any interviews.
She hasn't seen him since.
She hasn't seen him since.
Yeah.
Hasn't done any like television interviews. She does not want to be related to him or associated with him at all. It's ruined her life.
Of course. Yeah.
And her children, his children, are the same. Absolutely mortified.
Yeah.
That their loving, caring father was a monster.
Yep.
And did crazy things.
No good.
No. Well, that was the end of our episode. If you want to know more, I would recommend watching the doco on Netflix because it's very interesting. And it's kind of weird to like hear him talking and like he's like, I know like these cases are real, but sometimes you kind of like forget that they're real stories. So like to hear him talking like on the phone to this like doctor and like seeing his face on the screen, it's very like weird that he's like still alive and still in the world. It's very scary. It's shook me this week. I've been a little bitch this week. And yeah, that was our episode. So we will catch you guys next week. I'll wrap it up quick because I know this was a long one, but thank you for listening and let us know what you thought over on Instagram and leave us a review.
Tell me next week.
Bye, darlings.